This video is about adjusting the Sahaara bra to accommodate a wire. This is the pattern that I use for the Sahaara when I'm making it as a non-wired bra in its original format. I use the K cup with a 34 band and the bridge and frame look like this. However, my wire size when I'm making an underwired bra is a 44 regular. Which looks like that. When I place the wire on the seam line of the bridge, there's a lot of extra room at this end and a lot of extra room at this end. So I'm going to need to reduce the height of my frame in order to accommodate the wire. I'm not worried about the amount of spring. I actually quite like the amount of spring that there's going to be at both ends of the wire, and I think that will be beneficial to the bra. But this is how I'm going to reduce the height of my frame. So I've traced my frame off onto a new piece of paper, and if I move the wire, what I've done is measure, let's put it where it will sit when it's sewn, the height at which the wire sits plus room for wire play so that it can move within the cradle. And I've drawn a new vertical, a new centre front at this point. That means there's a difference of 2.3 centimetres from where the original centre front was to where the new centre front is. Now at this end of the bra, of the cradle, I'm going to chop off the height and reduce it down so again that I have enough room for wire play. But I've added the 2.3 centimetres, which is what this yellow stripe is, that I've removed from the centre front onto the back of the bra, onto the side seam of the bra, sorry, so that the overall cradle length will remain the same when I chop away this part here. So as you can see, I've now chopped away the centre front and the extra height at the armpit edge, and the cradle is now looking a much better match for the wire. So I think we'll go with this and see what happens sewing this up. And obviously I'll have to reflect these changes in the cups as well. One thing I should just mention is the centre front is now going to sit much lower compared to how it was when it was a non-wired bra. I also need to reflect that change in underarm height on my back band too. So hopefully you can see that I've just used my curved ruler to blend from the notch that I've just made, or the mark that I've just made, back into the arm side line that was on the original pattern piece, and it will reduce the amount of fabric that I have at that underarm point, which should correspond now to my new frame. And it shouldn't have affected, I'll show you on the original frame, the distance from here to here should be the same distance from the notch to the top edge on my modified frame. There we go. So it should be from that notch, the notch here, to that top edge there. That should now match. Now the inner cup is going to be a bit more tricky, and I might need to scratch my head about this a bit. So what I'm going to do initially is the same as I've done for the outer cup, and I'm going to remove this amount, the same amount that I've removed from the frame, off this edge here. Now this is going to really reduce the coverage at the centre front on this bra, at the point of the sternum, and it might make the bra a bit too plunge for my liking, but I'm going to give it a whirl as a first step and see what happens, and I'll twirl it up and see how we get on. Again, you can see I've already made quite a lot of modifications to increase the neckline length on this pattern already. We'll see. So I'm going to make a mark replicating this amount of length here. So I'll make a mark just here, and I will blend that mark into the neckline edge. But I'm not sure how it's going to work. We'll see. So there's my traced off pattern piece. And that is how much of a chunk we're going to be removing from this cup. I'm not sure that this is going to work. Right, so I've pretty much worked out what I needed to do to my inner cup. Here's the original cup and the original band. So I removed that much off the band, and then if I lay this over the top, you'll be able to see that I also removed the corresponding amount from the pattern piece. This pencil line, I hope you can see it, represents where that new centre point, that new centre front point would be if I had used that point to blend to the original strap attachment point. I felt that that gave me too steep a reveal on my top cup, too steep a V-neck, and so I've moved my strap across a little bit and redrawn the line to the new strap point, which gives me slightly more coverage. So I will go ahead now and sew this up and see how we get on. Right, so I'm all sewn, and this monstrosity that you see before you is my fitting band for a Sahaara bra with an underwire. And I will spare you the imagery because it's very translucent tulle, but it's worked. And so now the next step for me is to cut this out in a pretty material and show you how I did actually attach and the adjustments that I made to attach the channeling and inserting the wires. Hello, this video is about how to attach underwire channeling and underwires to the Sahaara wireless bralette. As you can see, I have got everything cut out. I've sewn my band together. The band is made out of 2 layers of sheer cup lining in opposing directions and 1 layer of stretch elastic lace. If you've seen my previous video on how to get a sharp point on the Sahaara, I followed the same method. I've basted around the edge of the cup and they come together to form a little cross at the front of the bra. I've also sewn on my back bands, which is a single layer of power net with an overlay of the stretch lace. And I've sewn up my cups. These are 1 layer of sheer bra tulle with, again from my previous video, an organza binding along the neck edge to stabilise the cup. And these cups have been cut to the pattern adjustments that I made on the video about adjusting the pattern to accommodate the wire. Okay, so this video will be focusing on how to sew channeling onto the Sahaara bra. Okay, so we're ready to sew the cups into the cradle. I have pinned my cups in. I'm going to add a few more pins in a minute, but I just wanted to show you that I line up the lowest point of the scallop in the lace with that little cross that I've basted in when I basted the cups in. The next pin is the notch midpoint on the cradle, and then I pin the 2 ends together, end of the cup to the end of the cradle aperture, and then I add the pins in between to control the curve. Cup 1 is all pinned in and ready to be stitched. This is what it looks like when all the pins are in. As you can see, the inner edge, which is the cup, is slightly fluted. And I just wanted to say that don't worry about this, because it's the area where the pins go through the fabric that's the stitching line. All of this seam allowance is fluted like that because you're trying to put 2 opposing curves together. Think of it like easing a sleeve head in regular garment sewing. Cup 1 is nicely secured in place now, and I'm going to move on to cup 2. So just to show you again, as I pin, I'm lowering up that low point in the scallop of the lace with the cross. Oops, let me move my fingers out the way. With the cross that I made when I basted in the when I basted the 3 layers together for the cradle. So now I have 2 cups in the bra, and I'm pleased with how they've lined up at the front there. I think that's going to look nice and smart. Now I'm going to add some channeling. Why am I going to add channeling to a non-wired bra? Well, there are 2 reasons really, or in fact probably more than 2 reasons. First of all, the channeling will help support the cup. So the seams on a bra, as well as joining fabric together, actually act as reinforcement as well. You've got a lot of layers of fabric there, acting as a framework to help support the weight that the bra carries. Secondly, covering the seams of the cups with channeling will cover up all of this raw edge here. And as channeling is plush as well, it's soft against your skin, so that could be another reason. And then the most obvious reason is that you would add channeling to the bra because you wanted to add wires. If you've never made a wired bra before, just to say that underwire channeling gets added to the seam allowance where the cup meets the cradle. It gets added on the side with the cup as opposed to the side with the cradle. So I'm going to be sewing this along like so, but I'm adding it only to the seam allowance. I don't want it to go through to the cradle underneath. So folding it over, it will just be added along the circumference of the cup, following along the seam allowance. I'm going to leave my channeling slightly long at the ends so that I can overlap and control the point of my bra front and make it all nice at a sharp point. I'm going to sew with the plush side up, and I'm going to sew with a scant sort of 2mm edge allowance along the edge of the channeling. This is how it looks under my presser foot and ready to sew. So I've got the bulk of the bra tucked away, out of the way, and I'm only going to be sewing on that seam allowance where the cup meets the frame, with the cup uppermost and the frame underneath. As I come to the end of my run of stitching on this first pass of channeling, I'm not going to sew right to the very edge of the cup. I'm going to leave about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres free and unstitched, because when we attach the elastic along the top edge of the bra, we don't want to catch the channeling in that to start with, because we won't be able to get our wires in. So I'm going to sew to where my finger is, and then we will finish it off later once we've put the elastic in. Now you can see that the channeling, the first pass of sewing, the channeling is sewn to the seam allowance towards the inside of the cup. The next job is to cut away some of this raw edging underneath so that it doesn't protrude out onto the frame when the second pass of channeling is sewn down. Before I sew the second pass of channeling on this side, I want to do my first pass of sewing on the other side. So raw edges are trimmed away, and I'm going to attach channeling exactly the same as we did before, just to the other cup. Again, I'm going to leave the channeling long, and then we'll be able to manipulate this piece of fabric here underneath the channeling to create a nice sharp point. Now both cup seam allowances have the channeling sewn, and this is where we're going to deviate slightly from how you would normally complete a wired bra. So I'm going to fold over my first channeling, and I'm going to stitch it down onto the frame, stitching again a sort of scant 2 or 3 millimeters from the edge where I'm running my finger. We don't want it to be any closer than that because we need to be able to get the wire through, but this is where the magic is going to happen. So I'm lining up, and I'm going to cut eventually my channeling. I'm lining it up, and I'm going to start stitching at the line here where the channeling is attached to the other cup. So my first stitch is going to be right here. Once it's sewn down, I'm going to snip off this long part, and I'm not going to worry that I haven't closed the channeling, because once it's sewn in and then I sew down the other side, you will see that it becomes enclosed by the opposite side's channeling. I hope that makes sense. Just to show you under the presser foot, I want my first stitch to be following that line of stitching where the channeling is attached on the opposite cup. So I'm going to sew from here, and I'm going to continue down and around the cup. So just sew nice and steadily all around the channeling, and I'm just showing you that I'm stopping again about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres away from the edge of the channeling. I don't want to go right to the very end. I want to leave a flappy bit so that I can get my elastic folded over underneath. Just to show you what I mean more clearly, my channeling is now sewn on this side, but I haven't sewn right to the very edge of the channeling. I have still got room, so when I sew the elastic along this line here, that I can fold that elastic under and the edge will be very neat. And finally I will chop off the top of the channeling and sew it closed once the wire's in. Next step. So I'm now going to cut away this channeling that I've already sewn down. So I've cut away that long bit of channeling from the centre front, and I want to make sure when I'm cutting that it's cut tightly enough that the opposite side channeling can fold down over the top of it. Before I sew this piece of channeling down, I just want to make sure that the little tiny bit of centre point on the cradle underneath is tucked down and under. It's very difficult to do this with one hand, but when I sew that down, I will sew starting at the edge of this channeling. So I will start just here and I will continue all the way around the cup. I should point out that I do back stitch at both ends of the channeling as well, and I'm sewing it just with a regular straight stitch. So I trim away these little bits of cotton. I will tuck that little triangular tip down and under, fold it inside so it's all out of the way and neat, and stitch that down. So you can see this is what it looks like under the presser foot. Okay, so now I have both sides of my channeling sewn down. The first side that we sewed, the channel end has been sealed by this row of stitching where we've attached the second side. So when I pass my wire through the channeling, my wire is going to come up against this stitching and not be able to go any further, and that's what we want. However, on the second side of channeling, if I was to put a wire in now, it would continue through and come poking out the end because there's nothing there sealing the end of that channeling. The best way I've found to seal the channeling is actually to follow the line of stitching that we'd done initially on the first pass and top stitch it down following that line. If I turn the bra over, and I hope you can see, there's a diagonal row of stitching that comes along here from attaching the channeling. What I want to do is to recreate the same going in this direction, and it will result in a little diamond shaped point at the front of the bra. I'll stitch it and then I'll show you. That will also allow me to get rid of the excess channeling here. Okay, so I've now done that, and it's formed a sort of diamond shape just there, where the two open ends of the channeling have now been sewn down and your wire cannot escape. From the reverse, you can see the stitching line here closing this channeling and the stitching line here closing this channeling. I'm actually going to add another little stitch in there because it's not gone quite far enough, and that might just be enough room for a wire to poke through, and I don't want that to happen. So now I can cut off this part, this long part here that I no longer need, and hopefully all of the fabric raw edges from the point of the cradle will be trapped underneath the channeling. I guess you could, if you wanted to, sew this bit down as well with a slip stitch if you've just wanted to be extra double secure, but I don't actually think it will be an issue. So I've now removed all my basting stitches and cut away all of my loose threads, and the central point of my Sahaara looks like this from the right side and like this from the wrong side. Now all that remains to be done is to sew my top elastic, and I will do that and then I will show you how to insert the wires and finish off the edges here. Okay, so I've sewn my upper band picot elastic on from the back wing all the way up to the top of the cup, carefully managing not to sew through the channeling underneath that we've left long and that we hadn't sewn. That this is why we left 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres free at the end without stitching it down. What it allows me to do is to do my second pass, again avoiding sewing into the channeling so that it all looks nice and smart. And then what we will do is insert the wires into the channeling and then simply sew down the end there. Let me do that and show you. So I'm not sure I'm capable of sewing and videoing at the same time, but just so you see, I've folded my elastic over and I'm stitching it down and I'm keeping the end of the channeling right out of the way as I pass. Okay, so all of the components of the bra are now sewn. The straps are on, the hook and eye is done, everything is finished. The only thing that remains to be done is to insert the wires into the casing and to cap off the top of the channeling casing there. Okay. When you're inserting the wires, often, not always, but often, the tip of the wire that goes at the centre front is shorter than the outer wire, and it often has a colour on the end. Now, this is a 44 wire, and the colour for a 44 wire is yellow, which does not show up at all well on the camera. What I'm doing is feeding the wire through the gap in the casing, not between the bra and the casing, but actually through that gap. The casing makes a tube and the wire sits within that tube. The wires are now in the casing and I'm going to sew them down, but I just want to reiterate that we don't want the wires right up close to the end of the stitching. We want some room so that the wires can move around within the casing when you're wearing the bra. If they were clamped tight and I sewed just here at the end of the wire, what would happen is that with wear, gradually the end of that wire would wear through the casing and poke you in the armpit. So I'm actually going to sew a little bit higher, just in line with the edge of the elastic, to enclose the wire within and finish the bra. And obviously I need to do that on both sides. So on the machine, I have lined my presser foot up with either side of the elastic, and I'm going to stitch right down the middle, right through the centre of that elastic. I'm going to go with a straight stitch and I'm going to go backwards and forwards quite a few times, and that will enclose that wire in there and hopefully it won't come out. You can also do this with a zigzag stitch, a very tight zigzag satin stitch if you want, but I prefer to use a straight stitch and I haven't had any problems with the wires poking out. Both ends of the channeling are now sewn down, or both sides I should say are sewn down, so all that remains to do is to chop away the excess here and voila, you have now made an underwired Sahaara bralette. So the bralette's all finished. I'm actually very pleased with it. I think it's very pretty. I really love this lace, and I especially love it with the lilac straps. I think it's really gorgeous. It fits me an awful lot better than it fits Gertie here, and as usual my main problem now is, do I put a bow on or do I leave it as it is? Thank you for watching.